J-Tech Studios in Atlanta, Georgia. It's America's favorite game show podcast. Tell them what they've won. And now, here are your hosts, Tom Bastek and Mike Jacobs.
And welcome in. It's America's favorite game show podcast. Tell them what they won. It's the game show, guys. I'm Tom Bastek.
And I am Mike Jacobs. How are you doing this week, Tom?
I'm doing good, Mike. I'm done digging holes. I'm actually building a fence right now.
Oh, congratulations. Good start to 2021 then.
Yeah. I'll tell you what, I'm on the manual labor diet. If anybody wants to know how to lose 33 pounds, just get in the manual labor world.
Oh, yeah, I bet. I've been unloading some of my older collectibles on eBay over the past couple weeks. Turns out I've had a bunch of money just sitting in boxes that I didn't even know about. So
yeah, I've got some stuff downstairs. I have a collection of Star Trek posters that I can't wait to list, and I'm thinking about just listing them all together in one lot.
Yeah. Well, so I don't think that's the best way to go.
Okay.
As I understand it from my wife's experience in selling antiques online.
Yeah, she knows what she's doing. I'll definitely take her advice. Absolutely.
Yeah, people tend to want one thing. Like if someone collects Star Trek or Star Wars posters, they want one, right? They need to finish their collection.
I see.
The idea of like buying the instant collection is not as popular as you might think, and it ends up diminishing the value overall. So generally speaking, you're better off selling them individually.
While we speak about Crystal, we might as well give out our website as well.
Yes, oddlyendearing.com. Go there for all your oddly endearing antiquity needs. She sells antiques and vintage, just kind of, whatever strange, interesting, fun stuff she can find.
All right, Mike, I don't want to waste any time because we've got a lot to talk to Christian about, including trying to stump him and stump the chump again.
I mean, we may have him this week, maybe. I got to do some more research to actually get the correct answer, but I got a really good question lined up.
All right, cool. Let's go to the news.
Light up your cigarette, crack open a beer, and put the kiddos to bed. From chaos around the world to carnage in your burial front yard, it's time for the news.
Thank you, Tom. Thank you, Mike. This is the news brought to you by BuzzerBlog.com. Now, a bit of a personal note to start. I was one of the, I'm sure, millions of people who watched the final episode of Jeopardy hosted by Alex Trebek on Friday night. In terms of the game, it was surreal hearing him talking about the show, like we'll see you next week, and them clearly not knowing that was his final episode, and they had a beautiful send-off to him at the very end of the show. And like I said on my podcast, it did to me what I'm sure it did to everybody watching. We'll miss him, and we get Ken Jennings starting Monday night, so we'll see how that goes. I saw a picture of him hosting it. He looks great. He looks happy. I am officially on board, and I was very much not on board when I first heard of the idea, but I am rooting for Ken. I'm rooting for everybody involved with the show coming up.
I agree with your assessment that he looks happy in that picture. I very much dislike using the term glowing for people, but he definitely is glowing in that picture.
Yes, he is.
I watched him on The Chase this week, and we'll talk about that, but he's endearing he's becoming more endearing on
Absolutely.
me. I feel like I kind of like this guy, and I want him to continue doing what he's doing.
I agree.
Am I the only one that's afraid of the thought that he might be like the permanent host? I mean, I have my list of favorites, but I don't know. He looks so comfortable in the role, and I'm excited to see him in action. I am willing to revise my opinion.
Don't know. I mean, if he ends up being the permanent host, I'm not going to be necessarily crushed or upset. I just really wanted LeVar Burton.
Right.
To me, I feel like this is as if there were a new Batman movie. If you put Michael Keaton in the role, you're like, oh, well, that's all right. He does a great job at it. But if you choose to not have Michael Keaton, it's going to be like, oh, who are they going to pick, right? So if you pick Ken Jennings, that's fine. He's going to fit the role. If you don't pick him, it's going to be like this exciting, like, oh, who are they going to pick? So in other words, I'm happy either way, to be honest with you.
As long as they don't pick Ben Affleck, I'm happy.
Good point. There is some caveats there.
Well, you're not going to like Wednesday night then.
Oh,
Uh-oh.
no. Oh boy, what else you got for us?
Well, speaking of other potential hosts for Jeopardy, we have a second addition to the pool of temporary guest hosts for the show. So, longtime network news star Katie Couric has been signed to take over the hosting reins of Jeopardy for a week, and this is according to several people familiar with that plan. What's interesting to me is that I don't think Jeopardy themselves has officially commented on it yet. So maybe we'll take this with a grain of salt. I don't see why it would be beyond the realm of possibility. I know not everybody is the hugest fan of Katie Couric, but I would be fascinated to see a woman take that role. I don't think, at least in America, we've ever seen a woman host a show, not even for like a one-off special or a April Fool's Day or anything like that. So I think that's an interesting paradigm shift. I'd be curious to see how that plays out.
I've never cared about her enough one way or the other to even form an opinion. I guess I get why people don't like her, but I don't know. I'll watch and see what she does on Jeopardy. I'm fine with it. I think it's just kind of a boring choice. Like, it doesn't have the sort of pizzazz that a LeVar Burton would have. Just like a weird, like, oh man, that's really cool, let's see what they do. It's just kind of like, oh, all right, okay, cool.
But see, I think to a certain segment of the population who watches Jeopardy, it is an exciting choice because it's to these people, it's a trusted voice. It's a female voice, which is a change from what we've seen on Jeopardy since forever. So I think to the right people, it is exciting. To us, maybe not. I think we're more entertainment minded as a group. I'll make that call for us. But again, interesting to see how it plays out. We have precedent for female game show hosts, especially nowadays. You've got people like Elizabeth Banks who are killing it right now. I would have, if you watch Zach and Miri, I would never pick her as the host for Press Your Luck, but she's doing an incredible job.
True. I think in the same vein, I would like to see Rachel Maddow over her.
Ah,
That's a good choice. I was going to say, and not that I agree with her worldview or anything about her personally, but if you want a strong female presence, Megyn Kelly would be interesting. I think that would be an interesting choice.
That would be an interesting choice.
all right. Christian, you got anything else for us?
Well, a fondly remembered word game is back on the air in the UK. Now, Lingo was on the air on Game Show Network for many years. It was on in syndication in the 80s before that. The Game Show Network version was much more popular. Lingo is back in a new batch of first-run episodes on UK TV, and it's done something that I didn't think Lingo would be able to survive. And it's pretty early in the run, so we'll see if audiences take to it. But they cut the game in half. There is no more bingo portion. This version of Lingo is all word solving.
Interesting.
Which arguably is the more interactive part of the game, where you try to figure out what letters are missing, what letters are in the right place. Other than that, I think it's a great show. We'll see how it does. But yeah, 2021, we have a new version of Lingo, which is one of my personal favorites. I love Lingo.
I was going to say, that's very exciting news. I love Lingo.
All right, Christian, how about this week in game show history?
Well, this week in game show, I'm glad you asked. This week in game show history, we're going back to
What a
January.
coincidence.
I was just sitting here thinking about this week in game show history, and you happened to come up. January 14th, 1915 is the birth date of somebody very incredibly, massively important in the world of game shows, a Mr. Mark Goodson. So Mark Goodson, Bill Todman Productions, responsible for the production of dozens of classic game shows throughout the 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, into the 90s. Some of his shows are still on the air today. You got Match Game, The Price is Right, which, by the way, The Price is Right, the current one, is 50 years old next year. How incredible is that? Talk about a format with longevity, But yeah, Mark Goodson was was the son of two Russian immigrants, really loved games growing up. When he was younger, he used to insist on organizing the games for all the parties in the neighborhood, whenever kids came over, whenever his mother's friends came over. And one of the things that he used to love to do was play the game one way, and then for the second run through of the game, play it in a slightly different way. He would change a rule. He would flip things around and insist that everybody do it that way, for the second go around, which was probably one insufferable kid. But that skill would serve him very well later on in life, as half of the duo of Mark Goodson and Bill Todman had a huge staff behind him that was creating tons of game shows. I mean, Card Sharks, The Price is Right, Password, Family Feud, Match Game, To Tell the Truth, Password, just all these unbelievably classic shows, all came from one production company. He was a perfectionist. A run through for a game show would happen several times before it even made it to the point where they would shoot a pilot. He was just so meticulous. There were legends going around the office about how if the bell for a right answer wasn't in the correct key, he would fix it. He would go in and change it, down to those little details. But again, you can't argue with success. Just one of the most successful television producers ever, and was born this week in game show history.
Well, happy birthday, Mark.
So, speaking of history, we made history this week, Christian, with a debut of what? Now we have 20 hours of primetime game shows going on.
We do, right. We mentioned it last week, but this is the first week in a very long time that we have over 20 hours of original game show programming throughout the week on network primetime television, which is, for our area of TV, a huge achievement.
Right. So now let me ask you a question. How many of those 20 hours did you actually consume this week?
I watched most of them. I think I saw everything except The Hustler, but I heard it was great.
Oh, The Hustler's the one I wanted to see the most, and I actually watched it, and I loved it. Craig Ferguson does a great job. The set is unbelievable. Mike, did you get a chance to catch it?
No, I'm a cord cutter, and I was unable to find it on any of my cord cuttery outlets.
All right, I'll have to see if I can't figure out how to get you to check it out, but it is it's really good. The set is like this library kind of thing. One of the things, the only thing that kind of bugged me about it was that they piped in a fake audience applause and stuff, and there's no need for it. It's actually a better show believing that it takes place in one room with just Craig Ferguson and the 5 contestants.
So they did the same thing on The Chase, and immediately it hit me. I was like, that's so weird that they have to have canned laughter and applause on a game show now. And like, I guess it's the natural choice, but I would have been really, really interested to see what happened if they just didn't do it and let the drama of the show speak for itself. I don't know.
Yeah, for me, I will talk about The Chase here in a second. I want to finish up on The Hustler quickly, but I think The Hustler's got a great premise, but I also feel like an hour is too long for the show. It could be a half an hour, and this is what I was talking about, Christian. The same thing, I feel like the same thing with The Chase. There's so much drama and BS that like you could just cut to the chase and
right
and speed it up. And that all goes back to the Who Wants to Be a Millionaire when everything changed. If you watch Card Sharks in the 1980s, it's higher, lower, higher, lower. If you watch Card Sharks now, it's like, okay, you've got a 2. We don't know what the next card could be. We're not sure. Let's check with everybody in the studio. Let's take a break and everybody pick their nose. All right, now what are you choosing? Oh, you're choosing higher. Are you sure you want to choose higher? Let's make sure this is, you know what I'm saying, right?
I know exactly what you're saying, and a lot of primetime game shows are guilty of that. I think of The New Weakest Link. I think of Card Sharks. I think of the new Supermarket Sweep. As much as I like it, that is a problem. And again, a lot of shows do that. And I wonder what the commentary is there on the audiences that are watching it. I wonder what they think of us, because back in the 80s, even in the 90s, games moved very quickly. And, the broadcast environment was different back then. They all had 22 minutes to fit in as much game as they could, and you had a lot of professional game show hosts and broadcasters who were filling the role of host, who were really good at maximizing their time and speeding it up, slowing it down, and fitting as much content as they could into that window. You don't really get that now. A lot of directors and a lot of television production companies rely on the magic of editing to get their thing down to, whatever time they need to get it. So that talent is no longer really required of on-air hosts.
So, what do you think of Sarah Haynes? Now let's move over to The Chase.
First of all, I thought The Chase overall was decent. I thought GSN did it better. I think the UK version is still the ultimate, and I don't think any American adaptation of it has even touched it yet. Sarah Haynes, I thought, did a decent job. A lot of the comments that we got on Buzzer Blog, which we've been engaging with so many fans this week about all the new shows that we've been watching, a lot of the comments about Sarah Haynes revolve around her pace, her reading of the questions, and how slow it seems to be compared to the GSN version, compared to any other version. I wonder if that's not a budgetary thing. You know, the producers are in charge of their hosts, and the host does what the producer tells them to do. So, you know, first of all, I think the money is ridiculous. You know, we had so in the UK version, you got £1,000 for a right answer in that first part of the game against the clock. Right. On the GSN version that I was on, it was $5,000 for every right answer, and I got 5 right in 60 seconds, which I think is pretty average. You're getting $25,000 per correct answer for the first minute of the game. Something has to happen there in order for the money to even out. So my suspicion is that they up the stakes to make the game look more dramatic, to make it feel heavier, to give it some more gravity. But the trade-off there is that you're not going to get as many questions in a minute. You're not going to get as much opportunity to make $25,000 a question if that's how much money they're giving away. So I don't think it's a fault of Sarah Haynes. I think it is purposefully done. I think that is a budgetary issue.
Yeah, go ahead, Mike. Go ahead.
If that were true, and I'm not saying it is or is not true, but if that were true, would it not mean then that her pace of reading the questions to the contestants would differ from that of reading it to the chaser? In the last round where the chaser has to, match the amount of questions they've got or whatever, she's still reading at the same pace there. And if it were a budgetary thing, would it not behoove them to now read the questions faster so that, the chaser can answer them faster and get through more and potentially win, not having to pay the contestants?
So my feeling is, I don't even know if it's budgetary or not, but if like people are truly worried about that, then the producers of the show need to say, okay, the clock doesn't start until the question is over. So they stop the clock at the beginning of the answer each question, if that's that big of a deal. I don't think it's that big of a deal. I think Sarah Haynes' cadence is fine. I wasn't crazy about her delivery, but again, I don't blame her for that. That show is trying to be Who Wants to Be a Millionaire. The soundtrack is almost identical. All the lights and craziness are almost identical. It is just a Who Wants to Be a Millionaire ripoff. And it's the drama they're going for. And again, that's another show that if you eliminated all that drama, you could get through it a heck of a lot faster. But they're dragging it out again. And my biggest pet peeve with that whole thing was I didn't like the ripoff of Millionaire, essentially.
I think one of the biggest problems with this version of The Chase is that they're focusing on the wrong element. People don't watch The Chase to see the celebrities or the famous people on the show, the chasers, beat everybody. They watch The Chase to see the chase, to see the interplay between the contestants and the chaser. I think they're focusing too much on Brad and James and Ken. I think that, yes, they are the stars of the show, but are they the stars of the show compared to the game itself? Not really.
Yeah, and I'm not sure about the Chasers Lounge thing.
Yeah.
Mike, you don't like it, right?
I don't like it. Well, I don't want to say I don't like it. It just feels unnecessary. I think earlier, Christian, you used the word silly, and I think that's really the best way to describe it. Like, it's just, what's the point, I guess? If they're not the chasers, it feels unnecessary and filler and fluff, and because of that, I don't like it. I don't inherently dislike it. I just dislike it because it feels very unnecessary.
Here's where I think they missed the mark. At one point, I don't know which one of the other guys, because I don't know the other guys like I know Ken, gets up and walks off screen. And it's right after Ken delivered this was the first episode for this year that I watched. And because I'm sure by the time this is out, we'll have a second episode in the can. But literally, he walks off the screen right after Ken makes like a really bad dad joke or something. And I was like, oh, God, is he walking off the screen and then coming on to the actual sound stage to make fun of Ken on live television? That would be amazing. And he wasn't. He was like just going to the bathroom or something because we came back from commercial and he was just back there in the Chasers Lounge again.
Right, which, it hurts because he wants to be that. If you follow James Holzhauer on Twitter, he wants to be the heel. He wants to be that guy. but they're not letting him do that. And as a result, you know what it kind of looks like? Remember Impractical Jokers?
Yeah.
That kind of thing where they have everybody watching backstage and like laughing and kind of dunking on each other. It's like, for that type of show, I really don't think that atmosphere fits.
I agree that there's a missed opportunity there. If you're not gonna have it actually interact with the show, what's the point?
Yeah. Especially because you're not even swapping out.
Right, that's what I'm saying. Like, it's just on a very minor note. The circular sort of pixely grid pattern in the very center of the stage is very, very well done. I like that a lot.
Yeah, I think the sets are great for all these shows. That's one area in which game shows have really advanced, is like set design. Yeah, great set on the Chase.
If you love Who Wants to Be a Millionaire, you'll love the Chase set.
Right.
Man, I think you're being a little hard. Like, I wouldn't say it's a rip-off.
Dude,
like,
listen to the music. It's almost identical.
I'm saying aesthetically there's a lot of similarities, but it's a very, very different show.
I mean, how many game shows of the past 15 years have not ripped off Millionaire's set or aesthetic or music in some way?
That's exactly what I'm saying. What I'm saying is it's just another ripoff. Like, let's have something new and different and exciting and wonderful.
I think ripoff is a harsh term.
Okay. All right. So talking about any of the other ones, Christian, you watched almost everything else that came out. I only saw Celebrity Wheel of Fortune this week, and I really dug it. But did you see some of the other ones that were out?
I did see most of them. Let me make a quick note. My big winner this week is Celebrity Wheel of Fortune. That was so much fun. And if regular, everyday Wheel of Fortune could be half as entertaining and exciting as Celebrity Wheel of Fortune, I will become a fan again. A big problem with Wheel of Fortune was that the show has really been on autopilot for a really long time. They pick the same type of contestants. They play the same type of game. Even Pat Sajak hosted the same type of way. The Celebrity version, there was a lot of room for him to play around, and really room for everyone to play around. I thought it was just so much fun. My opinion, best new game show of the week.
Awesome. I love Tony Hawk. I think he was great. By the time the show was over, I was done with Leslie Jones. She's a little over the top for me.
She's a very small doses kind of person. I don't dislike her, but I'm not gonna watch her for very long.
No, I love the woman, but I got to tell you, like, as soon as I got done watching the Celebrity Wheel of Fortune, the next thing that came up on my DVR was Supermarket Sweep, and the intro came up for Supermarket Sweep, and I was like, oh, no, okay, we're done. That is enough Leslie Jones for this week.
See, I don't know what it is. I think she's hilarious, and I could have watched her over and over again. Oh. I don't know. For some reason, it just tickled me. I thought she was so entertaining.
She reminds me a lot of a good buddy of mine from high school. He is hilarious. I love him to death. But, like, when he's gone, it's like, all right, okay, cool. You know, you need some time off.
I hope he doesn't listen.
Oh, God, yeah.
Oh, I'm. You know what? Craig Newman, if you listen, you knew I was talking about you before I said your name just then.
All right, Christian, this week our featured game show is Bowling for Dollars. Or I guess I should say our featured game shows is Bowling for Dollars.
Right, and Bowling for Dollars was one of those shows that, almost similar to the old Bozo the Clown show, was a franchised format. So local stations all over the country did their own versions of Bowling for Dollars with their own hosts, their own set, which the sets were mostly the same, and the music was mostly the same, format mostly the same. But the people who watched Bowling for Dollars in Detroit were used to one particular host, whereas the viewers of Bowling for Dollars in Fort Worth were used to a completely different host. So interesting in that way. I don't know that there are too many other game shows who successfully license their format that way. But yeah, I mean, fascinating show, especially when you look at some of the attire and some of the fashion choices for 1970s bowling alleys. I mean, there's a definite wholesome element to the show. Seeing people who are really nervous and excited to be on TV and maybe win a little bit of money. It's to me that human element is what makes old game shows so fascinating. Just the fact that, you know, you're not getting people who are well manicured and ready to be on TV and give a soundbite. These are people off the street who really like bowling, and the excitement comes through. Really interesting show.
As a person who really likes bowling, I never watched Bowling for Dollars.
Well, I didn't have, I grew up in Connecticut. We did not have a local version of Bowling for Dollars that I remember.
No, you had WOR, but it was before your time. I mean, I'm almost positive you had Channel 9 out there.
Oh, we did. Yeah, we did.
Yeah.
I think it was before my time, though. I know, Bowling for Dollars was really popular in the 70s, early 80s. I think
Right.
the most recent version, I think they relaunched it in
Detroit,
2013. Right.
Right. Yeah, Mike and I will talk about it in depth here in a little bit, but it's just interesting how it faded away, and so did the sport at a certain time.
Do you think that the popularity of bowling and the popularity of a show like Bowling for Dollars went hand in hand?
Mike and I are going to discuss it more later on in the episode, but I definitely feel like they didn't both end at the same time. But I think that the idea of being on a local public television show was bigger in the 70s than it is today.
Yes, much more novel, I think.
And so I think that once that novelty wears off, it's gone. And I think there was other game shows that were out in the 60s and the 70s and 80s that were products of their time. And when their novelty wore off, that's it. You're not bringing a game back like that because of the fact that it just was a product of that generation.
Right. And a lot of people for a long time argued that shows like Match Game were like that. You're never going to capture the spirit of the 70s the way Match Game did. And we have a really close competitor now on ABC, but for a long time it was believed that that's going to stay in the 70s. That's just what it was.
Yeah, to me, the Gong Show is one like that.
I was just about to say the Gong Show.
That's a perfect example.
They've tried a bunch of reboots, and none of them have really worked, and I really feel like that was a product of its generation.
Yep, agreed.
All right, Christian, it's time. This week we are going to stump the chump.
It's happening this week.
I'm nervous. That's what everyone's saying. It's going to happen. God.
Okay, well, so here's the deal. I'm fairly certain that we have one in the hopper I haven't used yet, but I couldn't find it, so I came up with a triad of questions about our Dean of Game Show host, Bill Cullen, and I'm going to need you to get all three of them right.
Okay, so that's what we're resorting to. He can't answer one. Let's just a constant barrage of questions.
Now, hang on. It's a 3-part question. In all fairness, you just have to get all parts correct.
Yeah.
All right.
Well,
All
and,
right.
and technically it's 4 parts because the first question is 2 parts.
All right, Mike, lay it on him.
All right. For Bill Cullen's collegiate career, what school did he attend, and what field did he study?
I will give a guess as to where he went to college.
Okay.
Well, I know that he is a native of Pittsburgh, so my guess off the bat would be University of Pittsburgh.
Bingo, bango.
Are you kidding me?
I did ask what he studied, but I don't actually care about that. You got University of Pittsburgh. I mean,
He's probably communications major.
No, I don't think so.
Journalism.
I think he was a medical student, if I'm not
oh
mistaken.
my God, what is wrong with you? How do you know this stuff? Do you know on what television program was Bill Cullen's last television appearance?
So Bill Cullen's last appearance, I mean, he had hosted shows going back to the late 40s, early 50s, but his career ended in 1990 when he passed away of lung cancer, but within that last couple years of his life, he was a guest on the might have been $25 or $100,000 pyramid. Actually, he was on with Betty White for a week of shows. And actually, I think the last episode of that week, maybe even knowing that his time on TV was sort of running short and he might not do many more appearances after that, Dick Clark ran through a list of all the shows he had hosted, which was a very short but nice little tribute. And hearing the list of shows that he's hosted makes you realize just how prolific the guy was. So yeah, I think that was I forget what the denomination was, but at that point in the 80s, it was probably the $100,000 pyramid.
Well, you should have gone with your first guess, but I'll give it to you. It was the $25,000 pyramid.
Oh, okay, gotcha.
But yes, the
pyramid is pyramid. I'll give it to him.
Pyramid is pyramid.
That's good.
All right. And so, as you mentioned, he famously died of lung cancer, being a lifelong smoker of what brand of cigarettes?
Or literally asking me what brand Bill Cullen smoked.
No, I'm not. That one was a joke. That one.
I started thinking for a minute.
Well, the thing is that was the question I came up with, but I could not find anything to say one way or the other. The best I could find was he did a promotional video for some sales conference for Newport cigarettes. And in that video, he says he is a fan of Newports, but he also says he smokes not brand X, but brand Y. And so I would have accepted any of those as an answer, but at the end of the day, it was a joke question because I have no clue what brand of cigarettes he smoked.
All right, how about a plug for Buzzer Blog?
Sure. Yeah, why don't we do that? BuzzerBlog.com is the #1 game show website in the world. Whether you're looking for information on new shows, returning shows, reviews of classic and current game shows, interviews, anything relating to the world of game shows and unscripted entertainment, BuzzerBlog.com is the place to go.
All right, Christian, thanks so much. We'll see you again next week.
My pleasure. Thanks, guys.
All right, again, if you'd like to submit a question for Stump the Chump, please do so via social or the website. We'd be more than happy to have you. And if you do Stump the Chump, you'll get a what did we decide? They're not die cut. What are they?
Enamel pins.
Enamel pins, yeah.
Put that on your lapel and look nice and sharp for the ball.
Absolutely. Okay, great. All right, well, this week our featured show, as you just heard us talk with Christian about it, is Bowling for Dollars, and we'll talk about all the gameplay, although I think I have a pretty good idea what this game entails.
I'll give you a hint. It involves bowling and dollars.
Wow. All right, it's coming up next. You've been listening to America's favorite game show podcast. Tell them what they've won. There it is, the theme song from Bowling for Dollars, our featured show this week.
Usually you come in with those intros saying, if you know that music, and I'm going to guess most people don't know that music.
You know, this was a very popular show, though, and we'll talk more about that in history. So now it's time for the gameplay. Mike, hit me.
Yeah.
Or strike me.
Oh, strike. Tom, I would never strike you.
It was a bowling reference.
Oh, okay.
Oh,
I
God.
thought you meant like hit.
Yeah.
Okay.
Just go ahead. Yeah. Just get into it. Yeah.
All right. Well, so it is not at this point uncommon that we've had games that don't have a whole lot of gameplay, and this is certainly one of them. Personally, in this instance, it was maybe the most disappointing one because there's so much room for a game to be here, and they just don't give us anything. We'll talk more about that later when with the reviews and whatnot. But man, was I disappointed in this show. But as far as what it is, what we do have, it's basically what it says on the tin. You go bowling and you win dollars. There it is. Sometimes prizes, I guess. Really, though, what I think is maybe what most interesting about this show is that we talked about this concept in Supermarket Sweep, but this show was all done locally and filmed and produced and made with local talent and all that, in all these different cities and aired locally there. So it wasn't like you think of a game show now, like where it's filmed out in LA and everybody sees the same one every week. Each city had their own version of Bowling for Dollars.
Yeah, and I think that's where the appeal was back in those days, is that everybody really wanted to see themselves on television, to see their neighbors on television winning lots of money. And some of these, I read some of the stories where they were giving away cars and trips and things.
I never saw anything that significant. That would be good to see, because you said lots of money, and boy, I mean, is that a relative term?
Well, I mean, yeah, no, but honestly, I read one story where in Detroit, which was probably one of the most popular versions of the show,
sure,
they gave away $100,000 worth of prizes in the first year alone.
Wow. Okay, maybe it's a kind of thing where it adds up, because they do go, we'll talk about this later. They do go through the contestants really quickly. Like there are a ton of people on every episode. But to your point, I do think you're absolutely right that a lot of the appeal of this show was like, oh, hey, there's, old Bill from down the road on TV.
Old Bill. We love watching Old Bill.
I was really hoping you wouldn't call me on that and it would just let it slide, but nope.
Sorry about that.
No, it's fine. But to that end, the start of each contestant's run, there is a fairly lengthy interview. Think like what you see on Jeopardy, only even maybe a little more so. They talk to him a good bit, maybe not as much as You Bet Your Life, but there's a decent interview. They talk about who they're there with and their family and whatnot. And very commonly they will also choose a pin pal, which they just reach into a bucket and pull out basically like a postcard sent in from viewers, and that pin pal is who they're playing along with. Typically that means that whatever they win, the pin pal also wins, but apparently there were some versions that were really budget and the person had to split it with their pin pal, which is like, imagine if you win $8. It's like, cool, I just got $4 and now some rando person's getting $4 in the mail. And you got to pay taxes on that, right? So you're getting 3 1/4. Good times. But yeah, so the contestant gets at least 2 rolls, and the base is that they will earn $1 for each pin that they knock over. Typically, a strike will net them an extra $20, or as I say, extra will be $20. So in other words, doubling the dollar per each pin. If you manage to get a strike on both rolls, you get the jackpot, and the jackpot is really the sort of like meat of the show. There are prizes in some versions, but the jackpot, it starts depending on the version in the $200 to $500 range, and then it increases by $20 after each bowler who doesn't win it. And again, each bowler is getting 2 rolls. They are churning through these people, so that jackpot actually does build up pretty quick.
To me, it sounds like it's more of an interview show than it is a bowling show.
I mean, if that's true, then the interview portion of it is also like, it's not a good interview show. It's failing at both aspects, in my opinion.
What I'm just saying is, it just seems like they spend more time interviewing the people and talking about who they brought with them and stuff than they do actually with the gameplay of the game.
That is true. If you don't get to that 3rd roll, your time on the show is significantly more interview than it is game.
What's the 3rd roll?
So if you get the jackpot, they would be given a 3rd roll, and getting a turkey will win you another prize. A turkey being 3 strikes for those not into the bowling lingo. But yeah, you could win another prize on top of the jackpot. And then the prizes that they win, some editions feature them like throughout, like they're always there. Sometimes it's like in this one where you get a turkey, you get a prize. But it would be prizes obviously supplied by local businesses as, I guess, product placement, marketing. Examples would be jewelry from a local jeweler, dinner for 2 at a fancy restaurant. In one edition, there was, if you picked up a 7-10 split, a local pizza place would give you 2 large pies.
Okay, the 7-10 split is nearly impossible.
Is it really?
Oh, it is. It's the 2 furthest. Okay, so it's the furthest left and furthest right pin. Like, it's almost impossible. I mean, I would love to know if it was just that or if it was any split that you got.
It may have. Well, it may be if you leave a 7-10 split.
Oh, that could be too.
That's interesting. Anyways, I know there's some form of 7-10 split gets you 2 pizzas, so I like that.
Sure.
Is there? You're a bowling guy, Tom. I know you love the sport.
I am. I'm a very big fan.
Is the term grandma's teeth a real thing?
So yeah, there's what we used to call it the Greek church as well. It's basically like, I want to say, it's like the 3, 7, 8. Like it's like 5 pins. And I have heard it referred to as that, but we used to call it the Greek church. It's just like when the ball pushes through the middle and you leave five different pins up there.
Okay, I didn't know it was specifically 5, but I don't even remember where it was, but I had some bowling video game where when you left like a certain number of pins interspersed throughout. It wasn't like not clumped together, you know. They a little graphic of grandma's teeth would come up, and it was this old lady with like a bunch of teeth missing.
Yeah, there's a lot of different slang that's gone on. I grew up and people will call three spares a chicken, which isn't really a true term.
It's like not a turkey.
If you had the 4, 6, 7, 10, which is the two on each side, some people called that the Richard Nixon because you put up two fingers on each hand. You know,
Clever.
Yeah, so there's a lot of slang out there. If you got a 111, you were in the crap house. If you scored a 111, and what that came from is if you took your 111, you crossed the top of it and put two doorknobs on. It was like an outhouse. So you were in the. We didn't say the crap house. Obviously, we used the S word, but that was I mean, these are old school things. These are back like when you used to actually have to keep score by hand. You know,
right?
Nowadays, it's all computerized and whatnot. I would say your turkey is probably the most. Recognized and still used a slang term for leaving something or doing something in bowling.
Right. But yeah, so in a lot of the versions of Bowling for Dollars, these sort of things were what would give you a prize. So it was almost the idea of like a parting gift, in that, you know, maybe you didn't get your strike or your spare, but you left a notable combination of pins that has a name, right?
Yeah, that's a lot like moonlight bowling, if you ever did that when you were a kid. Nowadays, it's like glow bowling and stuff.
Cosmic bowling is what we called it.
Cosmic bowling now,
yeah.
But back in the day, it was definitely moonlight bowling, yeah.
And then in some of the shows, there was also what they called a pin board, which was just basically a prize board. Like all the prizes that were available on the show were on a board, and if you got one strike, you got to choose your prize from the pin board. But I mean, that's it. There's nothing else here. It's literally just two rolls, maybe three in some versions if you get the two strikes. But like I say, they're just going through these contestants so fast, and they're not really winning much. Like a guy won $15. Some people like throw gutter balls. They get nervous and just tank it and get nothing. And I think you're right that really the popularity and appeal of this show was seeing old Bill on TV.
Well, and we'll talk more about that too, because I also feel like it was definitely a game for its age, and we'll talk more about that before we get to ratings in the next segment, which, by the way, I guess is coming up next.
Yeah.
Ready for a break?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I mean, you're absolutely right. Bowling ain't what it used to be.
We'll talk more about that next. It's the history of Bowling for Dollars, our featured show. Coming up next, you've been listening to America's favorite game show podcast, Tell Them What They've Won. And we're back. Episode number 31, segment number 3 of America's favorite game show podcast. Tell them what they've won. Michael, history time for Bowling for Dollars.
The history of this show is very vague. Like I said, it was created as a franchise game show meant to be filmed, produced, aired locally by local stations. It was created by Burt Claster, who was best known for creating Romper Room, which is probably a show not too many people talk about anymore these days.
Wow, Romper Room. I remember Romper Room.
Yeah,
Holy cow.
It's one of those ones that I never really watched, but I always knew existed just from references elsewhere.
Yeah.
Some of the franchises, as it were filmed in a local studio, and they actually built a double lane bowling alley in the studio. But most of them were filmed in real bowling alleys locally. Obviously, that makes a lot more sense. The idea of billing, I mean, I guess maybe if you're the New York or LA, you've got a little more money behind you and you can build it, but I don't see why you wouldn't do it in a real bowling alley. The hosts of the various versions always tend to be newscasters, weather people, sportscasters, similar sort of local TV or radio personalities, people who have a presence in the community already and would be known by the locals who would be on the show. According to Wikipedia, it began in the 60s. I did not find any actual dated information before 1972. That seems to be generally when it actually started. There may have been versions of that before in the 60s, but I couldn't find anything to actually confirm that. Suffice it to say, the 70s were when this show was at its peak. I'd say probably 72 to maybe 76, 78-ish were really when it was I don't want to say dominating the ratings, but comparatively, it was doing very, very, very well. Technically, this was the biggest shock to me of this entire thing. Technically, the primary run of Bowling for Dollars ended in 2008.
What?
Right? It was rebooted in Detroit in 2013, something like that. But no, the initial version of the show had an edition until 2008. That blew
Where was that at?
Buffalo.
Oh God, yeah.
I don't know anything about Buffalo, but
Well, it's interesting, and we'll talk more about this after you're done with history. But bowling has its stereotypes, and one of which is that like the colder states, the Norwegian folk, the Eastern European folk do more of the bowling than other people do. And they say that it's more the cold weather because it's something to do inside. So I'm totally not shocked to hear that Buffalo is the one that lasted to 2008.
that makes sense. And the thing is, though, there's not really a clear history here. So as far as the history of the show goes, I'm pretty much done, to be honest with you. The problem with this show is it's a lot like researching a local news program or something like that. It's not what we think of now as a show that had seasons and these were a collection of, what was it, like 39 different local editions, right? Something like that.
Yeah, I think it was 28, but yeah.
28, yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's so there's not really a clear start to finish timeline here. So instead, what I want to do is sort of talk about some of the more notable additions and changes that were made here and there.
Sure.
So yeah, let's just start. I'm going to go in. I was going to say it's in alphabetical order, but it's not at all. I'm terrible at the alphabet. I'm going to go in whatever order I wrote these in.
Sure, go ahead.
So Baltimore had an alternate version called Duck Pins and Dollars. You may be familiar with the idea of duck pin bowling.
I've never done it, but I know it well.
Yeah, and so I had heard of both duck pin bowling and candle pin bowling before this, and I'm glad we did this episode simply because it got me to finally look those up and figure out what they're all about. Okay, so duck pin bowling is apparently significantly more difficult than regular bowling. The pins are like sort of squatter and wider. They're like little fat short pins.
Yep.
And like just imagine taking a typical bowling pin that you'd see in an alley and just smoosh it down, and it's going to expand out as you do so. That's basically what a duck pin is. And they also use a little bit of a smaller ball. So you're the pins are harder to knock over, and you're using a smaller ball. Significantly more difficult than regular bowling, and because of that, the rules for duck pins and dollars were they were adjusted pretty significantly from Bowling for Dollars. Boston had candle pins for cash. Again, this is all regional stuff because these versions of bowling were much more popular in those regions. But candle pin bowling is kind of what it sounds like. They look like candles. They're tall, thin pins. And this time the ball is significantly smaller. It's like almost the size of a tennis ball, if I understood correctly. Also using adjusted rules, of course, for the differences between candle pin bowling and traditional bowling. Does traditional bowling have a name? Since we have duck pin, candle pin, is there?
I think it's just traditional bowling.
Okay.
That's really it. I mean, I don't know 10-pin bowling. I mean, I just don't know anything besides bowling, regular bowling, I guess.
Yep. Regular bowling.
There you go.
Los Angeles, that version was hosted by Jim Lang, best known for hosting The Dating Game. From what I can find as far as actual dates, this is in contention for the first version, but I don't believe it is. I personally think Baltimore is likely the first version because that's where Claster Television is located. That's the creator of the show, Burt Claster. I would think he started in his own town, but again, it was very hard to confirm any solid dates for any of this.
Sure.
Buffalo, like I said, that's the reason why it continued until 2008, so good on them, Buffalo. Charlotte, from what I can find, had the shortest run. They ran from September 84 to September 85. I could not find any specific dates to say if it was over or under a year, but there you go. Roughly 1 year. Charlotte, getting rid of it quickly. Detroit, as you said, I think Detroit was probably the most popular one. It always had the biggest prizes. The episode I watched, the jackpot got up to like 1,600. And they were the ones that tried to bring it back in 2013. From what I read, it's still running, but you said it died a miserable death like right away.
From what I read, that it only lasted about a year, and then it was done. And I would assume that, the original host, Bob Allison, was the original host back in the 70s, and they brought him back in 2013.
Oh, so he's like 106?
Well, no, he was 81 when he started in 2013.
Oh man.
So he would be 88 right now, still hosting. I don't know, maybe. I don't know. Anyway, so I think from what I read, it's done in Detroit as well. If we've got anybody out there in Detroit listening in, let me know if it's still on the air. They may still be actually airing reruns of it. Who knows?
Yeah, it could be reruns. I'm not sure. But yeah, if we got any friends in Detroit, let us know if you know anything about bowling for dollars there.
And what I can tell you about Detroit as well is if any spare was a split, they'd get 2 large pizzas from a place called Buddy's.
Ah, there it is. That's what it was.
So there you go.
There you go. New York, the first edition was hosted. The first edition was filmed in Madison Square Garden. Apparently there was a bowling alley there. I had no clue.
Yeah, it's closed now, but yeah, that's the history of MSG, man. Way back in the day, there was a bowling alley there.
That's awesome. The host is a man named Larry Kenny, best known to me as the voice of Lion-O on the Thundercats.
Of course it would.
Yeah, and then finally Winnipeg up in Manitoba. Of course, those wacky Canadians. I didn't even write it down there. It's just their own version. It's Canadian.
Sure, but 28 different versions. That's pretty amazing because there was some nationally syndicated shows that didn't run in 28 markets. It's pretty big for what it was.
It's so big for what it was, and there's no denying its cultural impact. I would be willing to bet that everybody at some point in their life has run across some reference to this show in some form or another, whether or not they knew what it was. Of course, I have 3 in my mind that pop up right away. First, of course, is Bowling for Columbine, an incredibly popular documentary, Michael Moore. And there is the pop punk band Bowling for Soup. I know them from the theme song to Phineas and Ferb, but apparently they're popular in circles of people who like that kind
I don't
of
care
music.
for them much, but
I'm
okay.
not a fan. Yeah. And Bowling for Burgers, which for me is maybe more in my head than Bowling for Dollars. We've talked about the movie UHF in several other episodes before.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, their parody of this is Bowling for Burgers, where a very, very large man by the name of Lou Washington, rest in peace, he bowls, gets a strike, and wins a plate just piled high with hamburgers, which honestly, I would go on Bowling for Burgers before I'd go on Bowling for Dollars.
I don't know. I'm a good bowler. I bowled a 300 once, and I'll even put the link up on to the YouTube video of the guy who taped it when I bowled my 12th strike. For anybody who wants to see it.
That's an incredible feat, by the way.
Well, thank you. It's tough to throw 12 in a row. It really is. I would think that with under television lights and cameras, it's hard to throw even one, never mind 2 in a row. So I definitely feel like there's a challenge there, but I also feel like that's just like a little game show. And this is probably a good time for us to talk about it, Mike. So we're rebooting Bowling for Dollars. What do we do to punch this thing up? Where did they drop the ball where we could pick it up and take it and run? Where did they drop the ball when we could actually roll it and make a strike?
The short answer here is literally anything. It's like, you earn rolls over answering trivia questions, or you have to complete tasks, and whatever you don't complete, you lose a pin, or anything. We watched this for less than 5 minutes, and all three of us in the room had ideas of how to improve this show.
To me, you could definitely do it like they do Press Your Luck right now, where like you earn roles,
right?
Like you earn, and if you don't get strikes, maybe your opponent wins or whatever. There's so many different ways you could do this.
So that like there is, I'm going to say innumerable ways that you could make this show better. And that's what I really was disappointed by and what I don't understand. Like, why? The only like remix that I saw, and now obviously we've read that rules were altered for different versions and some gave away prizes and yada yada yada. The only thing I saw that really changed the gameplay was that somebody had basically a random number generator, 3, 4, or 5, that determined how many rolls he got. And it's like, okay, cool. But how did this show become so popular, so widespread? Like you said, 28 markets is more than many shows do in their lifetime. So when there's no attempt at anything other than just let's watch old Bill on TV.
Well, and I think that's a product of its generation. And what I mean by that is, and I'll talk about bowling as well, but in terms of bowling for dollars being a product of its generation, I feel that in the 1970s, it was everybody wanted to be on TV. Like, it was amazing if you got on TV. And this was a way for you to get on local TV. And being on local TV was a big deal. I do not think in today's day and age, being on local TV is a big deal for anyone, because the internet is what it is and everything is national and international immediately. And, I've got 1 million TikTok views of blah, blah, blah. This is just not applicable anymore. You know what I'm saying?
You're absolutely right. I was actually on the news not too long ago. They interviewed me for a thing going on at my old house, and it was like not a thing at all. Like, I had to figure out how to go watch the news to see if they would put me on.
Yeah.
Or not, and so you're absolutely right that in the day of Twitter and social media, everything's available to everybody all the time. Everybody's a celebrity. So, who cares about being on local TV anymore?
And I also think too that bowling in general, it waned in terms of its popularity. In the 60s and the 70s and even into the 80s, bowling was at its heyday. It was at its peak. And I think that there's a couple of things that led to its downfall. The first of which I think is you had the health generation come in, and bowling went from being something that was a fun social activity to something that was kind of looked down upon, and it was dirty. You were wearing other people's shoes, which wasn't necessarily clean, and there was smoking and drinking involved, which wasn't healthy when everybody was out running and jogging in the mid 80s. And I think that that's when bowling really started to like get this misnomer, or this kind of
like a negative stigma.
Yeah, like a stigma that said that it isn't, I remember being younger and telling people that I bowled well, and I'd get made fun of for that. Like people would be like, "Oh yeah, well, of course you did. You're fat. That's why you bowled well. Anybody can bowl well. Look at all the fat people bowling. Anybody can bowl."
You're absolutely right. And when like growing up, we've talked about this like maybe 12, 15 years apart. I don't remember exactly what it is, but we're not that far apart. But the cultural change for the perception of bowling was massive in that time, because by the time I was growing up, bowling, like you said, it was for the fat, lazy guy that, you don't have to be in shape to be bowling, to be good at bowling. You can do it while eating pork rinds and smoking cigarettes and drinking beer, or, it's for... There was also the idea that it was like boring, right? Like that's what Homer's doing when he's idly sitting on the TV or sitting on the couch watching TV. It's what Al Bundy does just to get out of the house, to get away from Peg. Like it's not a highbrow activity at that point,
No, and they definitely have turned it into like it was, or at least it was for a period of time. It was the lazy man's game, and nobody would ever want to watch this on television, yada, yada, yada kind of thing. So I definitely see where this comes. Now, I will say this. Although I don't think television has bowling has come back to watching on television where people are like interested in seeing it. And again, I don't think that was the appeal of this back in the day. It was watching Old Bill that was the appeal, not the bowling itself.
Sure.
I think it was just bowling because bowling was popular. You know what I'm saying? This could have been anything for dollars. It just, they chose bowling because it was a popular at the time, a popular social game,
That makes sense. Yeah.
To me, I think that bowling as a sport has come back because of the fact that it is now no longer, not passe, but it's no longer taboo to go to a bowling alley and drink beer and have fun. It's a great social activity. It's a great indoor activity. And nowadays you've got all these craft beers and, they've got breweries. And I mean, you go to Vegas and all the local casinos, there's a bowling alley and it's always packed. I mean, it is. They now have these rock and bowl places that have concert venues that are literally in the bowling alley itself. They've turned a lot of one, like you and I just talked about the ones in Atlanta, where they're nightclubs actually, where they're doing cosmic bowling all the time. So bowling, I think, has lost the stigma of being a lazy man's thing, and it's just a social thing now.
Right. It's much more casual. Like
way casual.
The idea of going bowling, to me, is. It's the same as throwing darts at a bar or shooting pool or something like that. It's just an idle activity to pass the time while you chat with your buddies, right? Like it doesn't really matter how you perform or who wins. You're not even really keeping score. That's why they do it on computers now.
Right, and it's the same thing as like going to play bocce at the local bar or whatever. I mean, it's just something that's out there. Now there are leagues and there is a lot of popularity with that, but I will tell you that I've talked to the guy who was my pro, and he said that he watched his business in the last 20 years go right down the toilet because nobody's buying equipment anymore. Now, I will tell you, I own $300 worth of equipment in the basement, maybe $400, including my shoes. And I'm one of the few. Most people will rent their shoes and will rent their ball and go about their business. And the truth is, because I am a good enough bowler, I have a hard time going to a bowling alley nowadays and bowling because they don't keep the lane conditions for league bowlers during open bowling times. And it can actually be dangerous for me because I'm a slider, and if I don't have a clean approach where I can slide, I can easily pull a leg out, pull a knee out, fall very, very easily. And so bowling for me as a social event is not a go-to, even though I'm a good bowler.
That's interesting. That makes sense. Yeah, I don't really have anything to add, but it makes sense.
No, it's fine. I mean, I guess what I'm saying is that I know that bowling has changed, but I don't think we will ever see bowling for dollars come back unless it is totally redeveloped. And it's redeveloped with a lot more game, such as the examples that we've provided previously.
Yeah, I agree. I don't think we'll see anything for this.
That being said, it comes time to do some ratings, and I guess I'll go first on this. I mean, I love bowling, and I didn't really watch this show at all. I don't even know if it was even around when I was younger. I'm sure it was. It was on WOR in New York, and when I was young, and I never watched it. I maybe my mom and dad did. I rarely ever watched bowling on television, period. And the truth be told is that I didn't care who was on the local TVs, whether it was the news or whatever. And there was, it was only so local to me anyway because of the fact that, it was in the city and I was 60 miles north of the city. So it was not a big deal of my childhood. Now, I will admit that it was a big deal nationwide with 28 markets, doing it. So obviously it has some sort of an appeal. But there is no gameplay. There's not a lot of money to be won. It's a very local thing. I'm gonna go right in the middle and give it a 2.5. I guess bowling balls.
I was gonna say pins, but
pins. Yeah. 2.5 pins. It is.
All right, 250 for you.
Yep. Go ahead.
Man, you are generous, my friend. I don't even want to give it a 1. Like I think I've said the sentence, there's no zeros, but this one comes pretty close. There's no zeros, but this one comes pretty close. I mean, a 0.5, that's where I'm landing. Like it only gets that because it had some kind of cultural impact. I don't care about this. While I do respect bowling as a sport, and I'm I am amazed by your talents, and I am not faulting it as a game in and of itself. This is not a show. This is not bowling. You get a single frame,
yeah.
2 balls. Like,
Yeah.
who cares? 0.5. I'm not even giving it a 1. 0.5. Done.
All right.
I'd rather go bowling for burgers.
The lowest rating you've ever given.
Is it?
It is.
Good.
There you go. All right. Well, I think that's just about all the time we've got for today, Mike.
Yes, indeed. Thank you, Tom. Thank you, Christian. Thank you, Buzzerblog. Thank you, those who write us. Thank you, Stump the Chumpers. Thank you, Dean of Game Show host Bill Cullen.
Yes.
Thank you,
Yes.
thank you, Lou Washington. That's all I got. Thank you.
Well, tune in again next time. We'll bring you the latest and greatest in the world of game shows, as well as a brand new featured show, too.
And remember, you can catch us online, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and, of course, tellthemwhatthey'vewon.com.
Please subscribe, share, like, and drop a review if you like what you heard.
And if you didn't like it, I hope you throw a gutter ball.
See you next week, Mike.
Bye, Tom.
You've been listening to America's favorite game show podcast, Tell Them What They've Won, a JTech audio production, copyright 2020. No part of this podcast may be reproduced by anyone without the express written consent of the creators. For more information or to contact us, please go to tellthemwhatthey'vewon.com. All right, Mike, what did you learn this week?
I learned that something having a significant impact on pop culture in no way means that it's inherently good. Things can just catch on for unknown reasons.
Sometimes they can be inherently bad and be and have significant impact too.
Okay, good point. I did not think about it that way, but yes, no, you're absolutely right. What about you?
I learned that I still love bowling and I still hate bowling for soup.
Ooh, ouch. Get out of here, pop punk nerds.
Copyright 2020, a JTech audio production.